Hey folks, welcome back to the farm. As promised, we're putting all of our hog butchering videos together into one long video so you can see the process. We call it bullet to bacon. If you've been following the channel, you've seen these videos already. So if you don't want to watch the whole process, you can go into our playlist, and we made a playlist of those 4 videos where you can watch them individually. But we thought it might be beneficial to watch the whole process in one video. So here we go. We cut out all the intros and everything to all the videos and just strung them all together. Be mindful, this is a multi-day process, and then the curing takes over a week. So that's all included into this video. So let's go. So when you're dispatching an animal, I use a 22 long rifle. That way I can be at a little bit of a distance if I need to be, if the animal's moving around too much in the trailer. You want to get the animal calmed down. You want to get a nice straight shot. Now, the animal has 2 ears and 2 eyes, right? So if you were to draw a cross line between the opposite side ear and eye, where that line intersects is right where you want to place your shot. So right smack in the middle, the animal's ears are up here, so you'd come across both directions. So right in the intersection there is where you want to make your shot. The animal should drop straight to the ground. It's going to go into some reflex kicking and stuff like that, but that's normal. But the animal should not be on its feet. If the animal's on its feet, you haven't done your job correctly. So after the animal is dispatched, while the animal is still kind of moving around, get some help, get the animal out of the trailer, get it to where you can get it hoisted up. We use our tractor here on the Homestead. You could use an A-frame, a board, a cross between a couple posts or something like that, something tall enough to hoist the animal up, and get that animal hoisted by the back legs, and we'll show you how to do that. So right behind this joint here, there's a tendon that goes down here. You want to slice a knife through, all the way through the other side on the inside of that tendon. Get between the tendon and the bone, and the hook will go right through there, and that'll hang your animal. You want to do it on both sides. So once you get that done, get your animal hung up in the air. We have a beautiful hog here that we've got hanging from the tractor already. So the next step is to bleed your animal, and you want to come down here right below the shoulders and feel with your hand. You'll feel the breastbone. There's a little where the end of it is, and right below the breastbone you want to shove a knife straight vertical up into the heart area to bleed this animal. And I'll show you the knife that we use. This is the knife that I use. I recommend about an 8-inch blade. I bought this blade at our local farm store just for this purpose. So you would go right up just below the breastbone, straight up, and drive into the heart area, and then kind of twist the knife, and then the animal will start to bleed. If it's not bleeding, move it around a little bit and find that sweet spot. Now, we did it into a bucket because we didn't want blood all over the ground, so that's a good idea to have like a lick tub or something like that for the blood to go into. Now, if you're making blood sausage like we used to, we would wash the animal real well on the chest right there if we were saving the blood into a food grade bucket, but keep it as clean as you can. Now, once the animal has sufficiently bled out, we like to take a hose and clean the animal up as best we can before we start the skinning process. We're going to skin this animal because we don't have a tub big enough to scald this animal to shave it and leave the hide on. Now, if you don't have a skinning cradle, this is the next best thing. Get you a pallet, a couple 4x4s, lay your animal lengthwise on the pallet, and then prop it up on its back using these 4x4s. There's one on each side. Now, to do the skinning, we're going to use my dad's old knife here. Kind of a short curved blade. It's going to work really well. So my first order of business is I'm going to start down here on these trotters, and then you'll see right above this joint here, or this area, there's a joint right in here that we're going to carve around here and cut that off, and then we'll start skinning from there. That way we don't have any contamination from the hooves or anything like that. And then we'll start coming down the body just doing the skin. We're not going to gut it right now. And then we'll start peeling the skin down this way onto the pallet. And then once we get down about as far as we can go, we'll put this baby back down. We'll pick it back up. By that time, we'll have the hams all exposed and everything. We can grab it with the tractor again, stand it, and finish pulling the hide off the back. And then we will go ahead and eviscerate the animal. All right, we've started peeling. So after we separate our trotters, we come down here with a knife. We hold it blade side up, and we just come down that skin, underneath the skin. Keep the knife tip just right underneath the skin, pulling up, and write it right down. And then we come across, and then we peel it back. We peel down the sides of the hams like this. And then this little flap here, we peel all the way back. And then as you're skinning, you're keeping one hand underneath the animal right there. And then you're cutting right along the skin. Scraping the skin, don't scrape the meat because you don't want to hack up your hams. And then same with the blade here. Blade sharp point facing up, or the sharp edge of the blade facing up. Let me grab the blade and demonstrate here. So put the tip of your knife underneath the skin and then run it all the way up like that. Make sure you're not digging down inside. It'll ride right underneath the skin, go all the way up to the chin. So now that we've got the hams exposed, we're going to start here and we're going to start peeling this side. So the reason we're peeling it out like this is all the hair, the dirt, and whatever's on the skin stays on the inside, and it keeps the carcass clean as you peel it back. So like your right hand is your clean hand, your left hand is your dirty hand that you've got up underneath the hide pulling down, and just scraping right along the skin with that blade. Make sure your blade is nice and sharp. All right, we've came up, we've peeled this side, we've connected the leg, we've cut down the leg right here, peeled it back. I'll show you what we got going on the other side. We're pretty much all the way down this ham, all the way down to the back. What you do is you pull the 4x4 over on that side so the animal rolls that direction. And then we've peeled all the way down. Even peel the skull. When you get to the ear, you can cut right through the ear canal, and the ear will go with the hide. And then pretty much lined up with the jaw is where I stop. We peel it all the way down. So now we're going to roll it back this direction, and then we'll start working on the other side, the other side. All right, we got it peeled basically down to the backbone on this side. So we're going to put the gambrel back in here, lower this thing down, go grab our bucket, and we're going to pick this thing up, finish peeling that hide off, and then we'll get the guts out. All right, we've started peeling it down. We've got it lifted up, cut around the bung, leave it in place, and then the weight of the skin is pretty much just pulling this off. We just have to nick this with the knife. I'll show you. So just the tip of your knife here. See how that's just peeling off? Stay right along the skin. What you're looking for all the way down. You don't want to hack into that loin. But we'll continue to pick it up, and then once we get the skin off, we're going to cut around this bung, pulling it one way or the other to get around it. We'll tie this off with a piece of butcher twine, and then when we go to eviscerate the animal, that'll pull through clean and won't leak all over the inside of the meat. All right, we've got the bung tied off, and we've cut all the way around it. So we've got our bucket down here below the hog. We're going to start right on the bottom of the ribs here. We're going to cut down through that breastbone with a knife as far as we can go down into the neck right there. And then we'll start working our way up here, start getting those guts pulled out. We'll turn our knife backwards, slide up underneath the skin there so we're not puncturing any gut. And then that stuff will just pull right out. We'll be very careful not to carve up our pork skirt steak. We'll show you where that's at. So we're going to get after this. Now once you get your belly cut real gingerly without cutting the gut, work your hand up in there around that bung. You can feel it up in there. Work your fingers around it back and forth, break all that tissue loose, and then grab a hold of it with both hands and pull it through. That's what we've done here. This is hanging all the way out now. So now we can start pulling on the gut here, just barely nicking back by the backbone, and then all of this will roll right out. And remember, like I said, when you get down to the skirt steak, which is basically the diaphragm, which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, we want to make sure we don't carve up our skirt steak. All right, we're completely eviscerated. You can see our really nice skirt steaks in here. See them right there on the sides. Right there on the bottom of the rib. You got our kidneys right here. These just pull out by hand. You can just grab them and rip them out. And then the other thing you want to be careful of is your tenderloins are right here on either side of the rib, right up here underneath the ham, right in this section. So you don't want to be hacking up your tenderloin in there either. Stay away from that. So we're cleaned out pretty well. So we're going to get the hose over here. We're going to hose this thing off really nice. Got her all washed off really nice. We're letting her drip just a little bit. Then we're going to get her in the barn. All right, we're hanging in the barn. And if you'll notice, we went with 2 hooks here on our gantry here. We do that because we're going to split this carcass down the middle. And once we start processing, if we pull one side off, the gambrel is going to flip and then the other side will fall off. So we're going to pull this gambrel out. Next thing we're going to do is get our hand saw. We have a little hand meat saw. We're going to cut through this pelvic bone right here. And then we're going to get our sawzall that is fitted with a stainless steel blade. We bought this on Amazon. They make them for the sawzall. And we're going to cut down that backbone. There's our little hand meat saw we were talking about. Very handy to have. You can use it to cut the hocks too if you can't find the joints. It's hard to find sometimes. So we're going to use this. We're going to come right up through here and cut right through that pelvic bone. We got a pelvic bone cut. So now we've taken our knife and we've cut down in between the hams, and we've also scored a line right down the middle of the backbone for our saw to follow. And when you do this, you want to pay pretty close attention to staying on that center line. If you get one way to the left or the right, you're going to get into your tenderloins and your pork chops back here in the back. You don't want to tear those up. All right, we got her cut in half. Got her right down the middle. You see our 2 halves here. We also cut the head off right above the jaw line of the head. We cut it off, and we harvested the meat off of the head already. You can see this beautiful skirt steak in here that we were talking about earlier. That's fantastic meat. You don't want to carve that up. But our tenderloins are all good. Didn't hack anything up. So this meat's probably going to sit till tomorrow. The next day we've been getting down into the teens at night. So it depends on how quickly this cools down. We definitely want to cut it before it freezes. All right, we got our 2 halves here. We have our cutting table here that's on wheels. We have our bucket for our ham hocks and hams later. We have our big stainless steel table topper here that we can set our cuts of meat out on and our primals when we get them separated. We have a few tools here that we're going to be using, a couple knives, a meat hook, kind of a break-in knife, our little meat saw, some rubber gloves, and all of our bags that we can package in. We've got Kelly with us here today as well. Everybody loves to see Kelly. A lot of wind going on. It's really chilly out here. We've had the meat cooling down for 2 days. It wasn't quite cold enough yesterday when I checked it, but a good 2-day hang. We've been getting about 19 degrees overnight and mid-40s during the day, and that's perfect hanging weather, and it hasn't frozen on us, so it's going to work out real well. So our first order of business is to cut this into primals. This is our ham back here. This is our front shoulder, and this is our loin section here. So we're going to come back past the third rib here, which is right behind the front shoulder. And we're going to cut through this bone, and that's already cut. So then we'll come up here to the spine, right here, right in line with that. Really easy with a handsaw. You can feel when it's all the way through. And we're there. So the rest of this we'll cut with a knife because we're in between the rib and the rest of it is meat. Let me get my breakdown knife here. So we'll come right in between that rib. Meat is nice and cold, which is what we want, which makes it harder to cut. There we go. Let me come around on this side and connect that. Okay, you can see how that broke right through. Come through here. Nice long cuts if you can. We're just below, or just above freezing on this meat, so it's not as easy to get through. That outer portion is darn near frozen. Okay. So this is our front shoulder section. We're going to put it over here on our staging table real quick. Right there. Now we're going to do pretty much the same thing here with the hand, even though we don't have any ribs to look at. But you want to make sure that you're not cutting through your tenderloin. Your tenderloin goes up in here a little ways. So we're going to remove this tenderloin, and we're also going to remove our skirt steak right here. So I'm going to trim off this excess right here. Get that out of the way. Here's our skirt steak. We're going to stay right along those ribs and pull our skirt steak out. Score the back side out of that. It's not the easiest thing to get to because it's in down behind those ribs. Stay right along that rib. And there's our skirt steak. Same place on the beef. Fantastic piece of meat for tacos. We'll trim this up and we'll package that separately. So we've got our skirt out. So now we want to take our tenderloin out, which is right here underneath the spine. So the tenderloin comes clear up into here. So we'll get in here underneath these bones, and we're going to hug those bones. Just barely nicking the back of those bones back there, and then we can curve and go down. This is the tenderest piece of meat on this animal, on any animal, really. And it'll peel right out. On a beef, this would be your filet mignon right there. Fantastic, tender piece of meat. So we have our tenderloin out of there. So now we can go ahead and cut our ham off. We'll cut down as far as we can with the knife. Kind of look where the loin section and the hams separate right there. So we're going to go right in there. And then we'll come over here with the saw. See where your last vertebrae is here? We're going to be just below that. Okay, you can feel we're all the way through the bone. Come in here with our knife, and our ham is separated. We'll put our ham over on the table. So now, what we want to do is we want to separate our loin section from the belly. So, if you can see a line right down the bottom of this vertebrae, that's kind of what we're going to want to follow. So we're going to start with our handsaw right here, and we're going to come across all these ribs. There's our last rib. The rest of that we'll cut with a knife. And we can actually score that now, get down where we need to be. Got a little bit of that bone there. So right down, straight down there. Now as soon as we get the other side cut, then we can finish off with the knife with that. So we want to connect that right here. So angle your saw down, and then we'll just go right through those ribs. And there's those ribs. So that's going to come apart. Here's my knife over here. So we'll connect that with a nice long cut all the way through there. You don't want to hack at your meat. All right, there's our belly section, complete with our spare rib section. We're going to put that back over here. You can see our bacon down here on the bottom. So now, here's our loin section. If you were going to do bone-in pork chops, you could put this on a bandsaw and just cut your pork chops however thick you want to cut them. And those would be your bone-in pork chops. Most people will take this chine bone off. They would come in here right on the top of these ribs and just cut that chine bone right off of there. But it doesn't hurt, you can leave it on if you're doing bone-in pork chops. However, we're going to do boneless pork chops. So what we're going to do is we're going to carve our whole loin off of this rib section, and this section right here would be your baby back ribs. So we're going to save the baby back ribs. So all this excess stuff here can come off and go into the bucket. That can go into our shrimp bucket. I don't want to waste any of it. So let's take our small knife, and we're going to start right underneath these ribs, and we're going to hug those ribs just like that. You want to make sure your knife is sliding right along those ribs. Rotate it back and forth if you have to. And then there's our last rib. We'll just connect it right there. We have this section here we need to get under. Right back to the spine. All right. So see how that curves around? That's where you want to be. Just start peeling these ribs back with your fingers as you go, staying right along those ribs. Your knife won't cut through to get you because it's got all those bones right there. So now that we've got this side loose, we'll come over here to the other side. Let me turn around so we have good light. So here's all of our chine bones here. We have a little bone here. Get that out of there. So we want to come right along the backs of these. We're following those bones as well. Now on a deer, we do this as it's hanging. So this will start to peel out also. You can feel your knife dragging on those bones underneath. So now, let me get this end loose down here. So now we can start rolling this loin out. So you're going to go down in the back just to where you hit those bones, and it'll start rolling right out of there. You're just nicking the meat right along that spine right there. We've got a little connectivity going on up here, so we'll have to wiggle around just like that. There is our spine bone. We'll come in here and we'll trim all this up later and get whatever we can off of there for our grind. We're going to come cut our baby back ribs off later. So we have our loin section here. We're going to trim just a little, make sure it's nice and clean and straight. Probably going to cut this end off here and square it up. That could make some nice country style spare ribs. Got those two bones. Trim. Anything else hanging off here that doesn't look attractive. We're going to square this off. We have a little bone right there we're going to get rid of. Like that. We'll make some nice country style spare ribs out of that as well. So now we have our loin section free. All you need to do now is determine how thick you want your pork chops. We like them about 1 inch thick, so nice long strokes. And you have a beautiful pork chop. Keep your knife sharp. We have a sharpener here with us where we can screw this blade up every now and then. And we'll come back when we got all these cut. Before we're done, we're going to take our ribs, our baby backs that we've just cut off of the spine, and our spare ribs. I like to take my little hook, but you can use the tip of a knife. You get underneath here and grab that membrane, and then peel this membrane off the back bone side of the ribs. A little slimy. You can't get it. Grab a piece of like a towel or something, and you can grab it. so that membrane comes right off of the ribs. If it leaves just a little piece, that's fine. But now when you dry rub these ribs, you can dry rub this side and the flavor will actually go into the meat. All right, we have our belly section back up here on the table. So what we want to do now is we want to separate our spare ribs right here from our belly. Now when you get these in the store, that skirt steak will probably be attached to your spare ribs. If it is, that's bonus. You can cut that off and save it for something else, or just leave it on your ribs and you got more meat on your ribs. So to carve these out is just like we did the other ribs. You're going to come underneath here, you're going to stay right along those ribs, feeling them with your knife as you go. And then once you get to the bottom, you're going to kind of want to rotate up. You can see how the rib comes up. You want to stay right there in that joint. Come out of there, go down as far as you can. And then we'll continue to work our way down. Being very careful, because you carve into your bacon, you're going to lose that good bacon, and we don't want to do that. The more meat you leave on your ribs, the less meat you have on your bacon. You can feel your last rib right there. Now, there's some cartilage bones down in here. So you want to kind of feel where those things are at. And then once we start scoring down, we're going to try to come up underneath those to where they stay with the rib section. Right underneath that last rib, staying right along those bones. Just work it out slow. You'll have some beautiful bacon when you're done. We're getting down into that cartilage. So once you find it, you need to be underneath it. Just like that. All right, our ribs are peeled out. We have a little flap here that we can take off. There's that little cartilage bone in there. We'll go ahead and trim that off. Throw that in the bucket. That can go in our trim. You don't waste any little meat. Now feel around in here. There's some meat left on here. You'll have really nice ribs if you leave that. Your cartilage is kind of more in here. So you can trim this off like we're going to do. Right down through there. And that's what gives you, it's called a St. Louis style rib with the bottom cartilage taken off of it. It's a real beautiful rib. I like them much better like this because when I eat this, I don't want this cartilage in my mouth when I'm chewing that. So make sure you feel around in here. See these little cartilage pieces here? You can kind of cut down between them. We don't want that to go into the grind. So. Most of meat processing, folks, is just taking meat off the bone. If that's all you do, if you don't know how to do anything else, that's all you need to do. Then you got usable meat. That's going to go in the bin. We're not going to get too crazy trimming this. We can do this off camera. That's mostly cartilage. We have some on here we can save. That's mostly cartilage. All right, trim bucket, trim bucket. Now when I put stuff in the trim bucket, I make it so it feeds through the grinder. So that'll feed right on through the grinder like that. That way you don't have to go through and do it later. It's ready to go when you are. So look at our bacon. Look at how thick, crazy thick that bacon is right there. You don't need bacon that thick. However, can you make bacon that thick? Absolutely. But I want kind of an even strip of bacon across there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and square this bacon off like that. That's beautiful trim meat right there for grind. And we're going to do the same thing with the rest of this belly. See how we're real thick right here? Kind of where our flank is on here. So we want to be down about right here. Plus there's a little bone here. We can trim out of there. So this big thick section here, we're going to come in here like this. Some of you are going to think I'm crazy. Oh, make that bacon thick. But I want a nice even slab. That way it brines evenly, cooks evenly when we're smoking it. It'll all come to temperature kind of at the same time. And it's just a lot easier to do. You're not going to have half of your bacon done and getting dry while you're waiting for the other half to cook. All right, you can see that we have our beautiful pork belly right here. We've got it squared up and trimmed. Now, you don't have to turn this into bacon. This cooks really well on the barbecue, and you can make burnt ends out of this. Fantastic stuff. You could do some pork belly strips and cook those on the barbecue with some barbecue sauce. Would be fantastic. But look at this bacon, folks. Look at that beautiful bacon that we're going to get. So let's throw this over on the table. All right, we got our front shoulder that we're going to take care of right now. You can see we still have part of the ribs in here. So we're going to take our knife and we're going to follow right along those ribs. Just like that. You can see how those are coming out. Now you can feel right here there's a meat section and a seam. We're going to catch that in there, and then we're going to come up underneath this bone here, just like this. And then that'll pretty much bust right out of there. Now we have part of a bone left right there. So feel around. Anything that looks undesirable, you're going to trim off of there. The rest of that looks pretty good. Let's trim off just a little bit of this. Not a lot. So now we want another hock off of here. So what I'm going to do is kind of this, see this seam right here? We're going to take our knife and we're going to go all the way around, all the way down to the bone. And then we'll get our saw. All the way through that. Take our big breaking knife and go all the way through it. Okay, we have our big shoulder here. We're going to take any of this old dry stuff off of here. Cleaning that up. We have our hock right here. So we're going to trim this flap piece off right here. On a beef, this would be kind of your tri-tip roast right here. So that would be your beef tri-tip if it was a beef. Good piece of meat. You can save it as a pork tri-tip. So anything extra on this hock, I'm going to take off of there. That goes into the grind bucket. And then I think I'm going to square that off too. All right, there's our nice other hock. Really good pot of beans. Now, you could actually make 2 smaller ones out of this, but we're going to leave that whole. There's our pork tri-tip, but that's going to go in the grind. So we have our big shoulder here. Now, this is what we make pulled pork out of. You could leave this whole, but just for Kelly and I, this is a huge roast. We'd have to have a lot of people over to take care of this. Of course, the way we love pulled pork, we could probably get it done. So what I want to do with this is I want to come down, break it in half, and make 2 roasts out of it. So this is going to take a little bit of sawing to get this done. We'll find where our bones are at, right there. So let's cut through with our knife first, get as far as we can go. Now this is going to take a minute to saw because I got that big H bone in there. Oh, bucket dropped. Okay, you can feel it all the way through. So now we got 2 nice pork shoulder roasts that we can make pulled pork out of. We'll trim it up real nice, clean it up, and vacuum seal them. Got another real nice hock that we're going to smoke. Now, here's our big ham. I'm going to take just this top portion off of the ham here, kind of round it up. Just like that, make an attractive ham. All this fat looks good. So again, make that so it'll go through the grinder. It's all real good fat. Maybe a little dry out here on the outside. We can just shave that right off like you're filleting a fish. Like that. Beautiful sausage meat. So here's our ham. There's a bone right here that we could trim out. And then like I said, we're going to come in here and split this in 2 right down that femur bone. And it'll give us 2 nice big ham roasts. All right. So find your bone down here and your bone up here. You're going to follow your femur bone, and then you're going to carve your femur bone out like that. and then you got the what's left of your tailbone up here in the top. So now this is a completely boneless ham. So what we want to do now is we could actually make this into like 3 hams, which would be pretty good. Excuse me. So we'll come right along this seam right here. There's one. We'll trim it up just a little bit. Now this is the area that's really hard to get to when you're brining, and you'll end up with an area inside your ham that's uncured, and you don't want that. So by doing this, you're allowing that brine to get all the way down in this meat, and it'll brine in half the time, and you'll have a real good product. So this little tail right here, we're going to take that off, and guess where that's going? That's going to sausage. Beautiful sausage. So we have some stocking net bags that we purchased, and this ham will go in that bag like this and keep it nice and tight when we smoke it, and you'll have a nice little ham there that we can consume in 4 or 5 days instead of 2 weeks. Let's take the rest of our ham and see what we want to do with this. Let's get some of this nasty meat that's next to the bone in there. Trim that out. That's a good piece there. So we have another little bit of cartilage right there. So we'll go down right beside that. Trim that out of there. That goes into our grind. So we have this big ham left. Again, we can do this into a lot larger sized ham. We can roll this baby up in that bag and make a real big ham out of it. But again, we don't need a ham this big. So we're going to trim this thing up, make it look real good. See, that'll roll up like that. I think I want to take this tip off right here. That's going to go in the grind. We'll just clean it up and make it the best looking ham we can. I think I even want to take this section off here. We got a fairly large throat on our grinder, but this stuff will go right in. So, I think this here is going to be our ham now. So look at that. That'll be a real nice ham. We'll put it in that bag. We'll brine this thing, and then we'll hold it nice and tight. And that'll be a beautiful ham. So, other than trimming some of these bones up that we have right here, we're pretty much it. So we're going to bring you back and I'll show you the table of all of our cuts. All right, here's a look at our final cuts. And if you look at this, consider it double, because this is only half of our hog right here. So we have our spare ribs, our St. Louis style spare ribs. We have our baby back ribs. We have our beautiful pork skirt steak, which is going to be fantastic for street tacos. Here's our pork tenderloin, our beautiful slab of bacon. We have our 2 ham roasts here that we're going to make boneless hams out of. We have our 2 hocks that we're going to make smoked ham hocks with. And we have our 2 shoulder roasts that we're going to make pulled pork with. And we have all of our beautiful loin chops. And then look at all of our beautiful sausage meat in here. We're going to get our brine going for our hams and our ham hocks. So we got a couple food grade buckets. I got this one at Ace Hardware. The buckets that you get at like Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware generally are food grade buckets. If you look at the little triangle here, there'll be a number 2 in it. And that's a food grade bucket. They come with lids. So starting out with this bucket, we're going to put 2 1/4 cups of kosher salt. We're going to do 2 cups of brown sugar, 2 1/2 tablespoons of a pink curing salt, and that's not like pink Himalayan salt. It's actually curing salt that you buy, and we'll show you. 1 tablespoon of pickling spice and 1/4 cup of molasses. And then after we do that, we need to get 2 quarts of water to a boil. We've got all our ingredients in here. This is the pink curing salt I was telling you about. It's also called Prague powder number 1. You can get this online on Amazon, anywhere you can buy this kind of stuff. This is not interchangeable with Morton's Tender Quick. They're different ratios. There's recipes for Morton Tender Quick, but for this recipe, it's the pink curing salt. And if you've never dealt with molasses, this is sold over near your pancake syrup in your store. It's really thick, really concentrated, and adds a nice level of sweetness. So now we're going to get 2 quarts of boiling water and pour in this bucket to dissolve this mixture. Our mixture has dissolved, and you can tell if you're stirring the bottom of the bucket, you won't feel any more granules scraping on the bottom. So once it's dissolved, we're going to add cold water. We're going to do 4 quarts of cold water, so a total of 6 quarts of water. So I'm going to measure up 4 quarts and dump them in here. Now, a little trick you can use to cool your brine down even faster is throw some ice cubes in before you measure your 4 quarts. So they're part of the 4 quarts of water. And then when these ice cubes melt, it's plenty cool to throw your hams or your hocks in here. You don't want to put your meat into a warm brine. You want it room temperature or colder. All right, we're going to go down and get the meat and start putting it in our bucket. All right, we've got our boneless ham roasts up out of the fridge. So get yourself out a scale and you want to weigh these. And the reason you want to weigh them is because the heavier they are, the bigger they are, the longer they need to sit in the brine. The amount of brine in the bucket does not matter because it's all the same ratio. You just got to make sure that all of the meat is covered, but the weight matters. So you want your ham roast to stay in there 1 day for every 2 pounds worth of roast. We're between 7 and 5 pounds, so we're going to go with the 7. And then just to add a measure of safety, we're just going to call them all 8 pounds. So at 8 pounds, these roasts need to be in the brine for 4 days. Now, you can't brine them too long because they're only going to take in so much brine. And again, the ratio in the bucket of the brine is not going to change. The ratio to salt to water and all that. So what I normally do is I just go a straight 7 days. I don't calculate any further than that. That gives us a good safety margin and we'll be good with that. So we'll go 7 days in the brine. Every couple days we'll kind of rearrange things in the bucket. So if there's a spot up against the side of the bucket that's not getting brine, it'll be rotated around and it'll get it. So after 7 days, we'll come back with another video and we'll show you what to do when they come out of the brine. So I'm going to put all these in the buckets, and we'll get this thing stored in the fridge. Got all 4 hams in this bucket, and that's probably about 27 pounds of ham in this one bucket. Now we need to make sure the meat stays below the layer of liquid, and this is still 1 recipe of brine in here, so you can see 1 recipe of brine will do just about a full bucket. So we're going to find a plate that fits the inside of this bucket. We'll put a plate in here, and then we'll get a Ziploc bag with some water in it for some weight to hold that plate down. A lot of people will use brine in your Ziploc bag in case it breaks. It doesn't water down your brine, which is a good idea. And we actually have extra brine here in this bucket that we can do that with. So we'll get that done. Got our hocks in, and I believe because the box are so bone dense, because they've got the big bone in them, they're not going to float. So we're going to forego putting a plate in here. As we check these throughout the week, if for some reason they start floating, we'll go ahead and add a plate in there. Another thing I wanted to show you on these buckets is they have an O-ring in the lid to where they seal and they don't spill all over the place. And these lids will come with a plastic ring on here that connects all of these. So you can seal this bucket and it won't open. To open the bucket, you have to break the little tab and rip that plastic ring off so you can bend these out to get your bucket open. So as you open your bucket, you just wrap your fingers around and then pop it loose all the way around. It'll come loose. But if that ring is still on there, you'll have to peel that off. But this little hammer right down on there, and this bucket won't even leak. So we'll get this down in the fridge, and then we'll move on to our bacon. If you're as forgetful as I am, throw you a Post-it note on top. I've got a week out on here, so 12/19. These will need to be ready to be smoking. One says hocks, one says hams. That way I know what's in each container. Okay, hams and hocks are in the fridge. I wanted to touch base real quick on the amount of pink salt in that recipe. If you've used pink salt before, you will probably figure out that is a lot of pink salt for those pounds of meat. However, the pink salt is not going to be mixed into the meat like you would with a sausage or something like that. Most of that pink salt is going to stay in the brine. Only what soaks into the meat will actually be in the meat. And that's why it seems like more than what it should be. There's always going to be more in a brine than there is in like a sausage recipe or something like that. We have retrieved half of our bacon from the fridge. Left the other half down there to be cold. We have 2 half sides of pork belly. So we got a mixing bowl out, and for each bag, we're going to place in this mixing bowl 3 tablespoons of kosher salt, 1/3 cup of white sugar, 2 tablespoons of pepper, 2 teaspoons of paprika, and I'm going to use my smoked paprika, and then 1 teaspoon of the pink curing salt. And we're going to combine all that together, and then we're going to throw one of these bacon slabs out on this cookie sheet. We'll season it, flip it over, season it. We're doing it on the cookie sheet so we don't waste any seasoning. We want basically every bit that we mix up to end up on this side of bacon or in this bag. So this will help us coat the bacon really well by keeping it contained on the cookie sheet. Got everything in here for our dry rub mixture. And I use a little whiskey thing to stir it all up. Now, when you're thinking about a cure, a lot of people, when they think about bacon, love a sweet, smoky bacon. But I'm going to warn you against going too sweet on your bacon. I've done that before where you put molasses or maple syrup or whatever into your mixture. If your bacon is too sweet, got too big of sugar content, when you cook your bacon, It's going to caramelize very quickly in the skillet, and it's very hard to keep it from burning when you're cooking. So be mindful of that. I've made that mistake, and that's why I'm passing it on to you. This recipe here is not too sugar forward, but it gives you just that little bit of sweetness that you need in the bacon. All right, we're sufficiently combined. I'm going to get one of these out, and we'll start the seasoning process. Got our seasoning on. We pour about half of our mixture on here, and then you want to rub this around because you don't want any of it to be loose and falling off when you flip this thing over. Rub it around in all the moist areas of the meat. Try to get all of that to stick and coat evenly all the way across the belly here. We'll continue to do this because I want to get 2 hands in here. And then we'll flip it. And then same thing on the other side. Try to get some when you pick the bacon up. If there's any seasoning down in the pan, dip or blot your edges of the meat down into that seasoning. So we'll get this baby done and back in the bag. Got both sides of our bacon slab rubbed down. You can see we've got as much out of this pan as we could of the seasoning. And to get this back in the bag, kind of roll it and shove it into the bag. That way you don't get a bunch of seasoning on your sealing surface on the Ziploc bag. Because if you get a bunch of pepper and stuff in that zipper, it's not going to close tight. So we're going to do our other slab now, just like we did that one. Got both of our slabs done. So we're going to put this down in the fridge, and then every day I'm going to turn these over. And there's going to be 2 pans of these in the fridge with 2 slabs. So as this sits in the fridge, that salt and sugar is going to draw moisture out of that bacon, and that bacon's going to firm up. And then that liquid in the bag is going to create its own brine in the bag. So as you're turning these things over, it puts weight on one or more weight on one or the other. So every day I'll go down there and just flop these. So I'm going to take these down into the fridge and bring the other 2 up. And I probably won't show you the other 2 since we just did these. Got our 2 buckets down here in the fridge. We got our 4 slabs of bacon. This is our extra fridge down in the basement that we use for the garden and everything when the garden is going. So we don't pack this full of stuff. And because we don't, we can fit things like 5-gallon buckets in here. And we'll put extra sodas and stuff in here if we got people coming over. But it's good to have an extra fridge like this, and I highly recommend doing that if you're doing any kind of gardening or meat processing. It's nice to have all this space. These 2 drawers down here are completely empty. We can put other stuff in those. So good stuff. A couple things I wanted to mention just in case I hadn't before. Those bags that have the bacon in them are 2-gallon Ziploc bags. So pretty much a half of a belly will fit in each bag. And then the recipe does about 3 to 4 pounds of bacon. And each one of those is 3 to 4 pounds. That works out perfectly with the ratio. And then as you're going processing your meat, especially if you're grinding or doing something like that, as you go through your meat, feel around in the meat, make sure there's no bones left in it. Like these bacon, there was 2 of these bacon sides that had little pieces of that gristle from the spare rib when I pulled it off. You might have seen that in the video. But I just carved those out. But those are no longer in there, so they're not going to cause a problem later. So inspect your meat as you go. If you see a little bad spot, throw it out. Don't keep it in there. All right, folks, we have our hams brining. We have our hocks brining. We have our bacon curing. Next up is our sausage. We ended up with 30 pounds of sausage grind that we're going to grind. So we're going to get things together, go out in the barn where the meat processing area is, where the big grinder is, and we're going to run all this through the grinder, and we'll mix up some sausage. Now in the end of this video, we're going to give you a screenshot of all these recipes, and if you haven't written them down, we'll give you the ham cure, the bacon cure, and also some bonus sausage recipes. We have like a whole sheet of those. We're also going to be doing something different with this video process that we're doing here with the hog. Not only can you see these on our channel if you're paying attention and following along our channel, one of our subscribers, I'm going to make a new playlist in the playlist with just processing this hog from start to finish. So every video in this series will be in that playlist. So you can go into the playlist, start watching it, and it'll just continue on to the next video and so on and so on. So it's a one-stop shop for the whole hog process. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to string all these videos together to where the whole process is in one video. It may turn into a 2-hour video, but some people like to binge watch the whole process like that and don't like to go jumping around trying to find the different videos. So we're going to call that video Bullet to Bacon, which will be pretty good play on words, I think. But it'll be your one-stop shop video for the whole process. I found when I look up things on YouTube, nobody shows the whole process. They'll show you killing the pig, they'll show you skinning the pig, they'll show you doing this, doing that. But you got to go jumping around to a bunch of different areas and sometimes to even different channels to find the whole process. So we're going to do the whole thing for you, and we're going to do it like 3 different ways. So you'll be able to see this. All right, folks, we're out here with our big meat grinder. We have our 30 pounds of trim meat that we're going to grind up. We're using our larger plate, which is what you call this, that goes in the end of the grinder. And once we grind all this meat up into this tub, we'll take it inside the house and we'll portion it into the different recipes that we want to do. We'll season it up, and then we'll come back out and run it through our smaller plate. So let's get going. Okay, that's 30 pounds of meat that quick. So I'm going to show you a little trick. You're always going to have a little bit of meat stuck right down in here. So a neat trick is bring out some ice cubes and drop some ice cubes one at a time down in there. Because this stuff needs to be cold anyway. We'll be mixing ice water with it later. And then once you see just ice coming out, no more meat, cleaned out. Look at that gorgeous ground pork. So we have 30 pounds, so I've decided I'm going to do 5 pounds of Italian, I'm going to do 10 pounds of chorizo, and then I'm going to do 15 pounds of breakfast sausage because that's what we use the most of. So I got my scale underneath my bowl. I'm going to portion out 5 pounds right now for our Italian sausage. For our 5 pounds of Italian sausage, and sorry, Kelly, Italian, I've been saying Italian. She's going to correct me. So we got 2.5 tablespoons of salt. We have 1.5 teaspoons, which is a half a tablespoon of fennel, which makes it uniquely Italian sausage. 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1.5 teaspoon or half a tablespoon of sugar, and we're spicing it up with a little bit of cayenne pepper because Kelly doesn't eat this. You can go from anywhere from a teaspoon to 1.5 tablespoons if you really like it warm. So into that dry mixture, we're going to add 1 cup of really cold water, and we're going to stir that up. And that way the spices mix more thoroughly through the meat. And you want to add a little water to your sausage anyway, especially if you're stuffing it, but we're not going to stuff it. So now we're going to pour that through this meat, and we're going to mix it up with our hands. It doesn't have to be perfect, because remember, we're going to run this through the grinder again, and that's really going to mix those spices a lot better. Got our 10 pounds of ground pork. So for our 10 pounds of chorizo, you're going to see this flavor profile is a lot more aggressive. We're going with 5 tablespoons of salt, 5 tablespoons of paprika. We're using our smoked paprika. 3 tablespoons of cayenne pepper. I only had 2, so I used a tablespoon of crushed red pepper, which is fine. And then you got 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of ground oregano, 2 teaspoons of black pepper, 3 tablespoons of chili powder, and instead of the water, we're using 2 cups of red wine vinegar. And that's our chorizo recipe. So we're going to stir that up well. We're going to mix that through this 10 pounds of meat by hand. 15 pounds we have left. We're doing all in the breakfast sausage. So in our bowl for our breakfast sausage, we have 5 tablespoons of salt, 3 tablespoons of black pepper, 4 tablespoons of sage, which is ground, 4 tablespoons of thyme, which is my favorite herb, 1 tablespoon of the rosemary, 6 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon nutmeg, 1 tablespoon cayenne, 1 tablespoon of crushed red pepper. But like I said, I'm out of cayenne, so I just did 2 tablespoons of crushed red pepper, and that will be fine. Now to this, because we have 15 pounds, we're doing 3 cups of ice cold water. Got her mixed up. It smells fantastic. Now a quick tip on this is when you're dumping your spices into your meat, if there's some that stay in the bowl, grab a handful of meat and use that to wipe the bowl out. All right, completely mixed. We're going to put this out in our garage because this time of year our garage is a walk-in cooler. We're going to take this out to the barn and grind it. We're not going to take you back with us because we've already probably seen plenty of grinding. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our lightest flavor profile first in the grinder, which would be our Italian. We'll just take that whole bag out there, dump it into the tray, grind it, put it right back in the bag. And then we'll take our breakfast sausage out. We'll grind it right into this tub and then bring it back into the garage. And then we'll take our chorizo out and grind it last. And then we'll be done. There's our final grind, folks. It's on our chorizo. Mixed up really well. Got a nice mixture of the fat content. Sometimes if you leave this sausage too coarse, it won't form a patty. This is going to patty up real nice. We've got our half of our bacon pulled up here out of the fridge. We'll do the other half after we do this. What we're going to do is you can see how it's created kind of its own brine in here. We've been handling a little bit, so it moved around a little bit, but you can see it's created its own liquid. It's drawn the liquid out of that bacon. So we're going to take this out of the bag and we're going to rinse this off under cold water. And we're going to rinse off all those excess spices and the excess salt and cure and everything off of the outside of this bacon. And then we're going to pat it dry, and then we're going to put it on some drying racks on this cookie sheet and put it back in the refrigerator for a whole 24 hours. So let's get to rinsing. Got our bacon on our drying racks. We're going to take some paper towel and we're going to pat this as dry as we can get it, but it'll dry real good in the fridge uncovered overnight. And then tomorrow we'll get these in the smoker. Now the reason this bacon needs to sit in the refrigerator overnight and dry is it develops what's called a pellicule. It's a dry surface, kind of almost sticky. And when you put that in the smoker, that's going to allow the smoke to stick a lot better and you'll pick up more smoke flavor. It's now the next morning. Our bacon slabs have dried beautifully overnight. They got a nice pellicule to them. So it's 0 degrees outside right now, and the wind chill is minus 35 to 40. But we've started our smoker, and it's running at 150. So we're going to be able to get this done. You can see the smoker we have out in the gazebo, and it's smoking good, and it's running at 150 degrees. And what I'm thinking is, because it's having to work a little bit harder to keep up in this cold temperature, that it's going to provide a little bit more smoke, because the fan's going to be running much more often. So this might work out to our advantage. 2 of these slabs are going to be on the upper shelves of our smoker. So we went ahead and cut those in half, and then when we slice them, we'll slice them this direction. But it really doesn't matter in your final slice. But on this slice, you want to make sure you go across the grain. So that's what we did. And then our bottom slabs we left whole, because they'll be on the lower rack, which is a lot bigger. Here's what she looks like going in. Oh, it's crazy cold out here. Can't take your gloves off very long. So when my fingers thaw out enough, I'm going to go back out there. I'm going to put one of my temperature probes in the slab that's closest to the firebox and on the bottom rack, because that one I believe will be reaching temperature first. We're going to cook these to 150 degrees internal and then pull them off. You don't want to render any fat out of those or anything. That's why we're cooking at 150 degrees. But as the fire fluctuates, it gets up to 160 and so on. So it's going to get a good long smoke, but as thin as those slabs are, it won't take a terrible long time. I'm guessing right now around 3 to 4 hours. Now, meanwhile, while our cookie sheets are clear, we're going to go down and get our hocks, and we'll get those pulled out of the brine, patted dry, and put on our sheets here to dry just like we did our bacon. Got our ham hocks in the fridge, so we'll dry those out. We won't have time to smoke them today. We'll smoke those tomorrow. And then our hams that are in this bucket, we'll do the same thing to them tomorrow while these are smoking. Our bacon's just got to 150 degrees, so we're going to shut our barbecue down, and we're going to let this cool down out here because it's pretty much 0 degrees. We're not going to let it freeze, but we're going to let it cool right here on the rack. All of our bacon was cooled off out in the barbecue, and we brought it in and we've cut it into about 1 pound slabs. I don't like the crazy long bacon. This is much more convenient. It's about a little over sandwich size. And we cut up 1 pound of it here. So we're going to leave it like this, but we'll vacuum seal it tomorrow. I'm going to put this out in the garage to cool down even more. But look at that bacon right there. Doesn't that look delicious? So we'll see you tomorrow when we do the hocks. All right, it's the next morning. We're going to do the ham hocks today. And on a good turn of events, it's 10 degrees today instead of minus 10 degrees. And we've got an early start. We've got the master built going out there. We're going to go down in the basement and get our ham hocks out of the fridge and get them out there in the smoker. Got our 4 ham hocks in there, and we're using all 4 temperature probes because these are different sizes. They're going to come up to temperature a little bit different times. So because this meat is a little bit thicker than the bacon, we're going to be smoking at 250 degrees, and we're going to smoke until we reach an internal temperature of 145. So let's get this closed up so our fan will shut down. We'll go inside. It's just a waiting game now. All right, our hocks are all done. They all reach temperature about the same time. Wow. Look at those beauties. That's going to be really good in a pot of beans. All right, we're going to leave these out here in this frigid temperature and let them cool off. And then we'll get them vacuum sealed and put in the freezer. Kelly's shrink wrapping all our bacon, vacuum sealing it. That's what it looks like. It's about a 1 pound block. I didn't slice it. We'll just slice it whenever we use it so we can make whatever we want out of it. We retrieved our hams from the fridge downstairs and we've got them all rinsed off and dried. And now we're putting the hams in our stocking net bags. We ordered these just on Amazon. You can just search for stocking net bags for curing ham. And this is what you'll get. They'll come in a little package. These things are so long that I'm able to cut them in half and use one for 2 hams. You can see what a nice tight package it keeps your hams in. So now that we've got these hams all wrapped up real nice, we've got our bucket rinsed out. We're going to put our hams back in our bucket and we're going to soak them in fresh, cool water down in the refrigerator again. And that's going to draw some of the salt and the cure out of just the outer layers of the meat. Otherwise, the outer layers will be a little touch salty. And then once they have a good soak overnight, we'll get them dried out and get them out on the smoker. Next morning now, we've got our hams out of their second rinse, which we did overnight in the bucket in some fresh water. And we've also got our ham hocks out of the garage. They cooled down nicely and we've got them vacuum sealed for the freezer. These will last up to 5 years in the freezer in these vacuum sealed bags. They're really nice. Now the net bags that we use for these hams, you can see what a nice tight ham that these are going to make. When they cook, they'll hold their shape. But you're not limited to ham on these bags. You could smoke chickens and turkeys in these as well, or any kind of roast that you want to hold together. Instead of trussing it, you can put it in one of these bags, tighten it up real tight, tie a knot, and it holds it together real nicely. All right, folks, we're going to smoke our hams today. We're in here starting early. It's 3 degrees outside. We're baking some bread for our family Christmas party tonight. I've got the Masterbuilt going. We need to grab our hams out of the fridge in the basement. We're going to go put them on. Got our hams in the smoker. So we're going to close her up. We're cooking at smoking at 250 degrees until we get an internal temp of 145 to 150. Got a beautiful sunshiny day out here in Nebraska. It's hard to believe it's only 5 degrees with the sun out like this and a nice clear day, but it's still chilly. Still see our breath. All right, all of our hams are at or above our temperature that we need. Don't those look good? So we're going to let them cool out here on the barbecue. And we'll bring them in and we will vacuum seal them just like we did the ham hocks a little bit later on today. All right, folks, it's the next morning. We kept our hams, just left them out in the barbecue last night. We had our family Christmas party, and it's actually colder outside than it is in our refrigerator, so they did fine. They cooled down real nicely. Here they are. Don't they look just crazy cool? So we're going to cut our net bags off. We're going to pull those bags off, and then we're going to get these things vacuum sealed, but I may slice a couple slices off for breakfast. All right, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. We've got everything in the freezer now packaged up. It's been a real rewarding process, and don't be intimidated by it. We hope you get out and do it. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. If you got any questions about the process, leave them in the comments, and we'll get at you. Catch you on the next one.